Suzanne?
Yeah. We'll do 9:30.
Oh, Suzanne, if anyone is out there that can hear this, that has you, we'll do whatever it takes to bring you back.
It was Mother's Day 2020 when Suzanne Morphew left home for a quick bike ride in the Colorado mountains. She never returned. A few hours later, police body cam footage captured her abandoned bike near a remote trail. No blood, no signs of struggle, just silence. Soon after, her husband, Barry Morphew, appeared on television, weeping and pleading, "Suzanne, please, come home. Your girls need you." He looked like a heartbroken man, a husband desperate to find his wife. But behind those tears was something darker. A tangled web of lies, deleted messages, secret affairs, and GPS data that told a different story. A story of betrayal, deception, and murder. So why would a man go to such horrifying lengths to silence the woman he once promised to love forever? Tonight, we dive deep into one of the most chilling cases of recent years, the disappearance and murder of Suzanne Morphew. As you watch, let us know in the comments what part of this case makes you the most suspicious, and tell us where you're watching from so we can explore more stories together. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more true crime documentaries that dig beneath the surface where nothing is ever as it seems. Before the headlines, before the body cam, before the nation wondered where Suzanne Morphew had gone, there was just a woman, a mother, a survivor. Suzanne was the kind of woman who lit up a room without trying. Friends described her as warm, steady, and full of grace, the type who remembered birthdays, sent handwritten notes, and smiled through storms. But life hadn't always been kind to her. In her late 30s, Suzanne was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. The battle was long, brutal, and humbling. Chemotherapy stole her strength but not her spirit. She came through the other side with a deeper appreciation for life, her daughters, and the quiet beauty of ordinary days. It was back in college that she met Barry Morphew, athletic, charming, the golden boy of their small Indiana town. He was the kind of guy people trusted instantly. They married young. Suzanne traded her last name and dreams of a teaching career for motherhood and the mountain air of Colorado, where Barry had business opportunities. Together they raised two daughters, Mallory and Macy. To outsiders, they were a perfect American family. Church on Sundays, volleyball games on weekends, smiling photos under Colorado sunsets. But behind closed doors, things were shifting. Barry's behavior had reportedly grown controlling over time. Friends said Suzanne became quieter, more withdrawn. The bright woman who once sent uplifting quotes to her friends every morning had started keeping more to herself. She journaled a lot, sometimes cryptically. And then came the secret messages. In the months before her disappearance, Suzanne had reconnected with an old flamey high school sweetheart. Their exchanges were cautious at first, but soon grew tender, even romantic. It wasn't just nostalgia. It was Suzanne searching for a version of herself she'd lost. Someone who laughed freely. Someone who felt heard. Those messages weren't just love letters. They were escape routes, whispers of a woman imagining life outside the shadow of a marriage that had long stopped feeling like home. She never got the chance to follow that whisper. Sunday, May 10th, 2020. Mother's Day in Colorado. The air was crisp that morning, still clinging to the last chills of spring. For most families, it was a day of brunches, flowers, and phone calls filled with love. For Suzanne Morphew, it would be her last known day on Earth. What we do know is this. Suzanne had planned to go for a bike ride that morning, something she often did to clear her head. She was alone at home in Maysville, between pine-covered ridges, far from neighbors or passing cars. Her 2 daughters were away on a camping trip. And Barry, her husband, said he had left early for a job site in Broomfield nearly 150 miles away. At 8 a.m., Suzanne's phone went silent, not powered, off, just inactive, no more messages, no GPS pings, just digital stillness. By late afternoon, her daughters began calling. No answer. They asked family friends to check in. One neighbor, growing uneasy, eventually called the police. Suzanne's bike was found off a trail near County Road 225, abandoned, resting against a slope like someone had laid it down gently. Her helmet was missing. So was her water bottle. No blood. No scuff marks. No signs of a struggle. Barry returned later that day and told investigators he had been working all morning in Broomfield and had just learned of Suzanne's disappearance. He seemed shocked, distraught. He hugged his daughters. He cried. And then just one day later, he recorded a tearful video plea from an undisclosed location.
Oh, Suzanne, if anyone is out there that can hear this, that has you, we'll do whatever it takes to bring you back.
The video was shared with local news. It spread fast. The community rallied. Search crews combed the woods. Drones scanned the skies. Dogs traced the trails, but nothing. Behind the scenes, though, detectives were already questioning details. The timeline, the locations, the phone data, the gaps. Why wasn't there any footage of Suzanne riding her bike? Why did Barry's hotel room show signs that the bed hadn't been slept in? Why were GPS records from his truck so erratic? To the public, it was still a missing person case. But to investigators, it was starting to feel like something else entirely. There were no witnesses. No camera caught the moment. No one heard a scream. But sometimes, silence tells a story louder than words. In the days following Suzanne's disappearance, her husband Barry's behavior drew quiet attention. On the surface, he was the grieving spouse pleading for help, offering a reward, crying on camera. But behind closed doors, investigators began piecing together a different picture, a darker one. First, they pulled GPS data from Barry's work truck. It showed unusual movements on the morning of May 10th. According to his statement, he had driven to a construction site in Broomfield and stayed there most of the day. But the truck told another story. Erratic stops at multiple trash bins across town. Not just one, several. Back to back. Short stops. Minutes long. What was he throwing away? Then came the hotel surveillance footage. Barry had checked into a Holiday Inn the night before, but the bed appeared untouched. The hotel staff reported that the room smelled heavily of chlorine. Barry told them he had been cleaning up after himself. He also brought his own tools, unusual, even for someone on the job. Detectives dug deeper. Phone records showed Barry's device moving around town in ways that contradicted his stated timeline. At certain moments, he claimed to be in one place, but his phone suggested otherwise. Then came the most chilling discovery. Investigators learned that Barry had purchased a chemical known as BAM, short for butorphanol, azaperone, and medetomidine, a powerful tranquilizer used to sedate wild animals. The kind of compound that, in the wrong hands, could be weaponized. While no BAM was ever found at the scene, Suzanne's body, when it was finally discovered years later, showed signs consistent with chemical suppression. The autopsy would later suggest she may have been rendered unconscious before death. Barry also told investigators he had last seen Suzanne sleeping in bed early that morning, but forensics found evidence that contradicted that claim. Suzanne's cell phone had stopped responding hours before Barry said he left. Her Facebook messages, some romantic, some tense, had abruptly ended around 8 a.m. And perhaps most disturbingly of all, Suzanne had been secretly recording Barry with a spy pen, capturing moments of anger, intimidation, and stress inside their home. Though much of the audio was muffled or incomplete, one thing was clear. Suzanne had feared for her safety. She never told anyone she was planning to leave her husband, but her actions had already begun the process. Secret messages, private recordings, and quiet goodbyes. For investigators, it began to feel less like a disappearance, and more like a plan to silence a woman who no longer wanted to stay silent. The first sign that something was wrong came from a neighbor. Suzanne hadn't responded to her daughter's messages. She hadn't posted on Facebook, something she often did, especially on holidays. The girls, away on a camping trip, grew worried. A friend was sent to check in. Then, at 5:46 p.m., the call came in. Suzanne Morphew was officially reported missing. By the next morning, deputies from Chaffee County arrived at the Morphew home. Body cam footage from that moment shows a calm, slightly puzzled Barry greeting the officers. He explained that Suzanne had gone for a ride. "She probably just got lost," he said. "She'll be back soon." They didn't believe that. That same day, a search team located Suzanne's mountain bike, abandoned off County Road 225, just off a steep hill thick with brush. The bike was lying on its side, oddly placed, as if it had been dropped or staged. There were no drag marks, no tire skids, no blood, no sign of a fall. And strangely, no helmet, though she was known to always wear one. The spot was eerily silent. No one had heard screams, no torn clothing, no footprints nearby that could be clearly tied to a struggle. Her phone? Missing. Her water bottle? Gone. Her body? Nowhere in sight. Dogs were brought in. Drones were deployed. Volunteers walked shoulder to shoulder through the pine groves, but all they found was emptiness, like Suzanne had ridden into thin air. Barry joined the searches, but his behavior, as some would later recall, felt more like a performance than panic. He talked calmly, answered questions, hugged his daughters on camera, and when news crews showed up, he stepped in front of them, not behind. At that point, to the world, Suzanne was still a missing person. But to investigators, the forest was already whispering something much colder. For 3 years, Suzanne Morphew was a woman without a grave. Her name lingered in headlines, her smile frozen in missing posters. And then, in September of 2023, everything changed. On a dusty roadside near Moffett, Colorado, nearly 50 kilometers from her home, a search crew, working an unrelated investigation, stumbled upon scattered human remains, partially buried, weather-worn. Wrapped in time and silence, dental records confirmed it. Suzanne Morphew had been found. Her body was no longer intact. Exposure to the elements, animals, and time had taken their toll. But crucial evidence remained. Forensic pathologists determined the clothing she wore matched what her family last remembered. Athletic wear, fitted sneakers. Her jewelry still intact suggested the scene hadn't been a robbery. Most chillingly, traces consistent with chemical suppression were found, though too degraded for precise confirmation. The findings aligned with the theory that she had been sedated before death. No major fractures. No signs of blunt trauma. No bullet wounds. It was as if her body had simply shut down. The area where she was discovered was desolate, no surveillance. No homes, no reason for her to ever be there on her own. Someone had placed her there. Someone who knew those woods. Someone who didn't expect her to ever be found. For Suzanne's daughters, the discovery brought no peace. Only heartbreak made real. The question now wasn't just what happened to Suzanne Morphew. It was, who put her there and what were they hiding? In most murder cases, the killer slips up with blood, a weapon, or a witness. But in Suzanne Morphew's case, there was none of that. There was only data. And eventually, data speaks. From the moment she was reported missing, investigators began pulling digital records from phones, vehicles, hotel check-ins, surveillance footage, and even deleted cloud messages. Bit by bit, the illusion began to unravel. Barry Morphew's work truck became a silent witness. The GPS logs didn't just show where he went, they told investigators when he stopped, how long he stayed, and whether he opened the doors. And what they saw was deeply troubling. On the morning Suzanne vanished, Barry made multiple brief stops at random trash bins sometimes, staying less than 90 seconds. He claimed he was just tossing out work materials. But no job site required that many detours. No receipts. No leftover materials. Just missing time. Meanwhile, Suzanne's phone activity had stopped cold around 8 a.m. No texts, no calls, not even passive app movement. But her Fitbit showed brief activity spikes around that time movement without steps suggesting a struggle, or worse. More telling were Suzanne's text messages recovered from the cloud. In the weeks before her disappearance, she had confided in an old high school flame. Their chats painted the picture of a woman emotionally suffocated. She told him Barry was controlling, that she didn't feel safe, that she was preparing to leave. She had also used a hidden spy pen recorder, disguised as a charger in the bedroom. On the recovered audio clips, Barry's voice could be heard angry, aggressive, and dismissive. Not enough for conviction, but enough to raise red flags. Investigators also examined Barry's phone movements, which didn't line up with his own timeline. One curious moment showed Barry's device circling the house multiple times early that morning after he claimed to have left for work. Then there was the hotel room. Chlorine smell. Sheets unused. A trash bin mysteriously emptied. Bit by bit, the evidence formed a pattern not one of accident or chance, but of orchestration. Barry Morphew insisted he had nothing to do with Suzanne's disappearance. But his digital trail was painting a very different man. One who wasn't just cleaning up after himself, but erasing someone else entirely. It took nearly a full year. A year of whispers, of mounting suspicion, of eyes shifting from sympathy to scrutiny. Then, on May 5, 2021, the sheriff's office made its move. Barry Morphew was arrested outside his home, calm, clean-shaven, dressed in a gray t-shirt, like it was just another morning. But it wasn't. He was charged with first-degree murder, tampering with evidence, and attempting to influence public officials. The charges dropped like a hammer, shocking a community that had once stood behind him. At his first court appearance, Barry looked composed, not angry, not afraid, just still. But those closest to Suzanne noticed something colder, a smirk that flickered, shoulders that didn't slump with grief. During interrogations, Barry insisted he was innocent. He said he loved Suzanne, that she was the light of his life. He claimed she had been abducted, maybe attacked by a stranger, maybe even ran off. "They're making me out to be a monster," he said. "I would never hurt her." But detectives pressed harder. What about the chlorine smell in the hotel? The erratic truck GPS logs? The messages to another woman? The animal tranquilizer? The surveillance blind spots? Barry answered in circles, sometimes angry, sometimes tearful, but never the same story twice. What complicated matters further was that his daughters, Mallory and Macy, stood by him. They appeared at court hearings, spoke out to the press, and called the charges unfair. To them, he was just dad. The man who raised them, hugged them, cried with them. To law enforcement, he was something else entirely. A man who knew how to play the part, but couldn't quite keep his mask from slipping. At first, prosecutors thought they had enough. In May 2021, Barry Morphew was indicted for the murder of his wife, even though Suzanne's body hadn't been found. It was a bold move, relying heavily on circumstantial evidence, digital trails, and behavior patterns. The case was set for trial. But in April 2022, just weeks before it was scheduled to begin, the prosecution made a stunning announcement. All charges were dropped without prejudice. Why? Because Suzanne's body still hadn't been recovered, and without it, there was no cause of death, no physical proof of a crime scene, no concrete link tying Barry directly to a murder. The DA's office feared losing the case entirely, and in the U.S. legal system, a not guilty verdict means no second chance. They waited. Then, in September 2023, hope returned. Suzanne's remains were discovered, deep in a desolate part of Sawache County. Forensic teams rushed in. Evidence was preserved. A full autopsy was completed. And with that came confirmation. The case could now move forward with new strength. In June 2025, Barry Morphew was re-indicted for the murder of his wife. This time, the case was different, stronger. The forensic findings suggested chemical suppression consistent with BAM, The animal sedative Barry had suspiciously purchased. GPS records were reanalyzed. Deleted texts recontextualized. A full trial was scheduled. No more theories, no more benefit of the doubt. What once looked like a family tragedy was now laid bare as a methodical, calculated takedown. And this time, the courtroom would not look away. Suzanne Morphew didn't ask to be a headline. She was a mother, a friend, a woman who once beat cancer, who kept going even when life knocked her down. She smiled through pain. She wrote love notes to her daughters. She forgave more than most would. And when her heart grew restless, she didn't scream or run. She whispered quietly to those who might understand. But her silence was met with something far more cruel. The loss of Suzanne shattered not just a family, but a community. Her two daughters, Mallory and Macy, were forced into an impossible grief, caught between the mother they lost and the father they still loved. To this day, they carry that weight alone. And what about Barry Morphew? If found guilty, he will spend the rest of his life behind bars. But even if justice is served in court, there are no real winners here. Just a home that no longer echoes with laughter. A chair at the table that stays empty. A Mother's Day that will never feel the same. This case reminds us that evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it sleeps beside you. It cooks breakfast. It says, "I love you," with a hollow ring. So what can we take from this? Pay attention. Listen to the silences. When someone pulls away, don't just assume they're fine. And if you sense something isn't right, speak even when they can't. Suzanne's voice was taken from her. But tonight, we remember it. Not just for how it ended, but for how it lived. Quietly, kindly, and far too briefly. Thank you for staying with us through this difficult story. If this case moved you, please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Let us know where you're watching from and what part of this story stayed with you the most. Until next time, stay aware, stay kind, and never stop asking questions.